President Trump has, in the space of a few hours, twice urged countries, including the UK, to send warships to the key waterway of the Strait of Hormuz, which is being blocked to global shipping by Iran. Its foreign minister said the strait is closed for any ships linked to its enemies and their allies. It's meant that global oil prices have soared with no sign of let-up. There have been US-Israeli strikes on Iran's main export terminal for oil, Kharg Island. President Trump said that US forces have totally obliterated every military target. Tonight, drones hit Kuwait International Airport's radar system. And there have been other attacks by Iran on neighbouring countries, including on the US Embassy in Iraq, on Saudi Arabia and Israel, which itself has struck targets in Lebanon. There have also been evacuation orders for parts of Doha in Qatar. And in the United Arab Emirates, one of the region's largest oil storage facilities was hit by Iranian drones. Our correspondent Nick Beek sent this report from Dubai.
The latest Iranian targets in America's sights, smashed from the skies. This is Kharg Island, just off the coast of Iran, and the lifeblood of its economy. It looked like this in calmer times. 90% of Iran's oil exports pass through here, the vast majority of it going to China. The US says it's only hit military targets, not the oil, but may do so if Iran keeps striking commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump wants the likes of the UK, France, even China to send warships to allow the route to reopen. Iran claims it's only shut to its enemies.
As a matter of fact, the Strait of Hormuz is open. It is only closed to the tankers and ships belonging to our enemies.
There are reports that more American ships, including the USS Tripoli, are on their way to the Middle East, bringing thousands of Marines who could be used in a ground attack. In the Iranian capital Tehran, a funeral today for a senior figure killed alongside the former supreme leader 2 weeks ago.
In just a few hours, President Trump called on various countries, including the United Kingdom, to send warships to the Strait of Hormuz, a vital shipping route currently blocked by Iran. Iran's foreign minister announced that the strait is closed off to any vessels associated with their enemies and their allies. This situation has led to skyrocketing global oil prices without any signs of slowing down. There have also been US-Israeli strikes aimed at Iran's primary oil export location, KG Island. Trump stated that American forces have successfully destroyed every military target they aimed at. Recently, drones targeted the radar system of the international airport in Kuwait. And we've seen other assaults on neighboring countries, including attacks on the U.S. Embassy in Iraq, as well as on Saudi Arabia and Israel. Notably, Israel has retaliated by striking targets in Lebanon. Some parts of Doha in Qatar have even issued evacuation orders. In the United Arab Emirates, one of the largest oil storage facilities in the region was struck by Iranian drones. Now, let's shift gears a bit. There's been some buzz about a recent appeal rejection leading to worries about Trump facing arrest. It'll surprise you to hear how overblown that sounds. A lot of the chatter makes it seem like he just got hit with a big court loss and is about to be carted off to jail, but when you dig into the details, there's really nothing to worry about. As of March 14, 2026, there hasn't been any appeal rejection causing immediate fears of arrest for Trump. In reality, he isn't facing any impending jail time, and there are no active criminal cases where an appeal could lead to his incarceration. What's stirring up the confusion are ongoing civil appeals related to Trump's administration policies. Some of those appeals have gone in his favor, while others have not, but they're purely civil and don't carry the risk of jail time. Those videos claiming otherwise are either referring to outdated information or are just fabricating stories. It's honestly hard to believe information is so distorted these days. That's precisely why we created Pump Politics, to deliver you real stories that cut through the noise. Okay, let's dive into what's really been happening with Trump's legal situation because the buzz around it doesn't quite match up with the facts. So, first off, all of Trump's criminal cases have been sorted out. The New York hush money case wrapped up with an unconditional discharge back on January 10, 2025. He was found guilty on 34 felony counts, but here's the kicker. Neither the judge handed down jail time, a fine, nor probation. Basically, he got a conviction on the record, but with zero penalties attached. And yeah, Trump is appealing that conviction, but the appeal is really focused on either overturning the conviction or reducing it, not on dodging jail time, because there is no jail time involved. The sentence has been served, and it was basically a slap on the wrist. Now, moving on to the federal cases related to January 6th and those classified documents, those were tossed out after Trump snagged the presidency again in 2024. Special counsel Jack Smith dropped both cases due to the Justice Department's rule that you can't prosecute a sitting president. So those cases are history, and there are no appeals to worry about since they were dismissed. Lastly, there's the Georgia election interference case, but let's leave that for another time. I know it's a lot to take in, but the bottom line is that all the talk about him being in immediate danger of arrest seems a bit exaggerated, given that all these cases have either been resolved or thrown out entirely. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to the legal situation surrounding Trump, but it's important to note right off the bat that he doesn't have any active criminal cases hanging over his head. This all stems from the fact that the prosecutor, Fani Willis, was disqualified, which meant that the case was completely dropped. So he's in the clear on that front. No criminal appeals, and therefore no risk of arrest based on any criminal charges. What Trump is currently dealing with are civil appeals tied to the policies of his administration, which is a whole different ballgame. Civil cases don't end with jail time. They usually lead to changes in policies, injunctions, or even monetary damages. So, if he were to lose a civil appeal, it would simply mean a policy gets blocked or he has to switch things up. It doesn't mean he goes to jail. It's merely a setback in terms of policy. Let me give you a few specific examples of recent appeals so you can see how this all plays out. On the 3rd of March, 2026, Trump's administration went through a bit of back and forth with an appeal related to an executive order about law firms. They were trying to prohibit certain practices they didn't agree with, but the courts shut that down. They appealed, then withdrew the appeal, only to reinstate it later. It's just the usual legal maneuvering concerning policy. No threat of arrest here. Another instance occurred on the 21st of January 2026, when Trump's administration decided to drop an appeal regarding their attempts to block funding for anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. The courts ruled against Trump, saying those executive orders were a violation of the law. After initially appealing, they opted to drop it. Again, it's about policy rather than criminal issues. And one more example for you. On the 7th of March 2026, Trump lost an appeal to revoke temporary protected status for around 350,000 Haitians. The appeals court ruled that his administration couldn't take that action, leading them to lose on that front. So the Haitians get to keep their status for the time being, but it's yet another policy loss for Trump, not something that leads to any arrest. In summary, the recent appeals Trump has been engaged in are strictly civil matters that revolve around policy changes. None of these situations bring any threat of him facing criminal charges or arrest. There's been a lot of chatter about Trump potentially facing arrest, but let's clear the air a bit. Many of the videos circulating about his imminent arrest are just pure fiction. Sure, some of these YouTube clips have disclaimers saying they're speculative or fictional, but that doesn't stop people from taking them at face value and sharing them like they're actual news. What a mix we have. On one hand, there are videos exaggerating real civil appeals, and on the other, complete fabrications that create a false narrative about Trump and his supposed impending arrest. The reality is Trump has some legal protections in place that act as a buffer while he's in office. Thanks to the Supreme Court's ruling in 2024, presidential immunity means he can't be arrested for any official actions. Plus, there's a policy from the Department of Justice that insulates sitting presidents from prosecution. Even after he steps down, arresting and imprisoning a former president is no easy feat with all the practical barriers involved. Now, don't be misled by those videos claiming he's in danger of arrest. It's either a case of intentional misinformation or just some creative storytelling that people mistakenly treat as credible news. So let's unpack the civil appeals Trump has recently faced and why none of them could lead to any threats of arrest. First up, there's that executive order related to law firms from March 3rd. Trump put this order out there to regulate how law firms operate, especially aiming at those that are seen as filing politically motivated lawsuits against the government. The order seemed to threaten to cut federal contracts for firms that didn't play along, which led to a backlash. Law firms and legal groups pushed back, arguing it was a violation of the First Amendment and messed with the attorney-client relationship. The court sided with the law firms issuing injunctions to block the executive order. In response, the Trump administration decided to appeal those injunctions, looking to reverse those rulings and let the executive order take effect. However, something interesting happened on March 3rd. The administration pulled the appeal altogether. It seems they may have realized the odds weren't in their favor, or were perhaps working on a compromise with the law firms. Either way, it's clear this isn't anything that's putting Trump's legal status in jeopardy. So let's break this down. The appeal got withdrawn, then just a few days later, they decided to jump back in the ring and fight again. It seems they couldn't let it go. But here's the crux of it. This whole legal tussle isn't really about Trump facing any criminal charges. Instead, it's focused on whether an executive order is actually constitutional and legal. If things don't go his way, the worst-case scenario is that he loses the appeal, and that specific executive order remains blocked. He won't end up arrested or in jail, he just can't implement that particular policy. So in short, this appeal isn't about Trump worrying about going to jail. Now, on January 21st, 2026, the appeal regarding DEI funding was dropped. Early on in his second term, Trump had issued executive orders aiming to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the federal government. This included cutting federal funding for organizations that support DEI initiatives and requiring federal contractors to prove they weren't involved in any DEI activities. It even directed federal agencies to look into and put a stop to DEI programs altogether. But here's where it got interesting. Civil rights organizations, states, and advocacy groups pushed back and took them to court, claiming these orders violated civil rights laws and fundamental legal procedures. The court sided with them, issuing injunctions that blocked those orders. When the Trump administration decided to appeal, it was a bit of a roller coaster, but eventually they just dropped it. It's hard to say for sure why. Maybe they figured they would lose and didn't want a negative ruling hanging over them, or perhaps they wanted to channel their legal resources into other matters. There's also the possibility they plan to come back at those orders in a new, less attackable form. Either way, by dropping the appeal, the injunction stayed in place, and those DEI orders remained blocked. Just to be clear, this wasn't about Trump facing any criminal charges. It was purely a policy setback. They lost a legal battle on the legitimacy of certain executive orders, which meant that those policies couldn't move forward, but it didn't land Trump in any personal legal trouble. And let's not forget, on March 7th, the immigration parole appeal also went down the drain. This was part of the larger clash over Trump trying to get rid of parole and temporary protected status. So here's the scoop. Trump made some executive orders that took away temporary protected status, or TPS, from Haitians, Venezuelans, and folks from other countries. He claimed that the situations that let these people qualify for TPS had changed and that the program was being misused. But immigrant rights groups stepped in and sued, arguing that Trump didn't follow the right processes and that yanking TPS would cause serious humanitarian issues. The courts were on the side of the immigrant rights groups, issuing injunctions that blocked Trump's revocations. Fast forward to March 7th, when an appeals court decided against Trump in the case concerning Haitians. The court found that revoking TPS for about 350,000 Haitians wasn't right, so the injunction stayed in place. This means Trump lost that appeal, and Haitians can keep their TPS, at least for now. But really, this is more of a policy setback for Trump than anything else. He's not facing arrest over this immigration issue. It just means his policy can't go through. Now, it's up to the administration to figure out whether to give the whole thing another shot with stronger legal arguments or to back off altogether. Now, onto the criminal cases, because despite all the noise around this, appeals in those are what really matter. The New York hush money case is the only criminal one where he actually got convicted, with 34 felony counts. Right now, he's appealing that conviction. But the weird part is that the sentence was an unconditional discharge, so no jail time, no fines, and no probation. Even if his appeal doesn't go his way and the conviction stands, he won't be doing any jail time since he's already served the sentence. Essentially, it was nothing. Trump's legal team is pushing to have the conviction overturned by claiming there were legal blunders during the trial. They say the judge showed bias, the jury instructions were off, and the prosecution's case wasn't solid. However, if all those points fall through and the conviction remains, he won't face any new penalties since he's already served his sentence. What this does come down to is his legacy and how he's perceived legally, not whether he'll be going to jail. If he wins the appeal, the conviction disappears, and he can claim he was never convicted in the first place. So, here's the deal with Trump and his legal situation. If he ends up losing his case, the conviction is going to stick around on his record. But the truth is, no matter how this all plays out, he's not headed to jail. The federal cases related to January 6th and those classified documents, they got tossed out. There's no appeals process because those cases simply don't exist anymore. Special counsel Jack Smith moved on after Trump got reelected, and the case in Georgia got dropped when the prosecutor was disqualified. In short, all of Trump's criminal cases are wrapped up, so there aren't any criminal appeals that could land him in trouble. Now, let's get into why Trump isn't sweating over an arrest anytime soon. Presidential immunity is a big deal here. Back in 2024, the Supreme Court said that presidents have this absolute immunity for their main constitutional duties, plus a kind of presumptive immunity for other official actions. So even if someone thought Trump was messing up right now, they wouldn't be able to prosecute him because of this immunity. Another key point is the Department of Justice has this long-standing rule that says you can't indict or go after a sitting president, since that could mess with their official responsibilities. So while Trump is in office, the Justice Department won't hit him with any criminal charges, but even after he leaves office, it gets tricky. No former president has ever faced prosecution, and there are all sorts of security, political, and legal hurdles that would make it really hard to make that happen. While he's president, he's pretty well shielded from any kind of arrest. On the civil side of things, the appeals he's dealing with aren't a threat to that protection since civil cases usually don't end with jail time. They just lead to changes in policies or injunctions. So if Trump loses a civil appeal, it doesn't mean he'll be arrested. He just won't be able to push through a specific policy. Oh, and let's touch on some of the fictional buzz out there regarding Trump's supposed imminent arrest. There are videos online claiming he's in trouble, but a lot of those are based on completely made-up scenarios. For instance, there's this video from February 6th suggesting the Supreme Court turned down an appeal and that Trump is facing arrest. But if you take a moment to look at the disclaimer, it clearly notes that the content isn't real and is purely for entertainment. Unfortunately, a ton of people skip reading those disclaimers. It's amazing how people just watch a video and take it at face value, sharing it around like it's gospel truth. This leads to fictional content being spread as if it's real news. So, let's clear up the confusion surrounding the appeals Trump is involved in and whether they pose a risk of arrest. First, the appeals we've seen lately are all about civil administrative stuff like executive orders from law firms, blocks on funding for diversity programs, and immigration parole matters. These aren't criminal cases that could lead to jail time. For instance, the law firm executive order appeal is really about whether an executive order is constitutional. The anti-DEI funding appeal revolves around Trump's ability to pull funding from organizations that support diversity initiatives. And when it comes to immigration, the appeals are focused on whether he can take away certain protections for immigrants. These are policy disagreements, not criminal prosecutions. So if Trump loses one of these appeals, it just means a policy gets blocked. No arrest, no jail. It's simply a setback in terms of policy. Now, on to Trump's criminal matters. The New York hush money case, which is the only one that led to a conviction, has been wrapped up with an unconditional discharge. This means he won't face any jail time, even if the appeals don't go his way. Trump is appealing that conviction, but the actual consequence was a discharge. No jail time, no fines, and certainly no probation. This means that whether he wins or loses the appeal, he isn't going to jail. It's more about his criminal record than avoiding incarceration. Finally, let's talk about the federal criminal cases. Those were dismissed due to Department of Justice policy, meaning there are no pending appeals because the cases simply don't exist anymore. Both the January 6th case and the classified documents case were thrown out by special counsel Jack Smith after Trump was reelected. The DOJ guidelines state that you can't prosecute a sitting president, which is why Smith dropped them. Since the cases are gone, there's nothing left to appeal. So, here's the deal. Trump's legal battles in federal criminal cases have pretty much evaporated. No appeals are left that could lead to his arrest, and the Georgia election interference case got tossed out once prosecutor Fani Willis was disqualified. In short, all of Trump's criminal cases are wrapped up, leaving him without any active prosecutions or appeals threatening his freedom. Now, there's also the whole Supreme Court immunity ruling from 2024 that plays in his favor. It prevents prosecution for things he does officially while in office, Plus, there's a Department of Justice policy stating that you can't prosecute a sitting president. Even once he steps away from the presidency, there are massive practical and political hurdles to arresting or imprisoning someone who used to hold that position. So, while Trump's the president, he's got quite the legal shield against arrest. And if he deals with civil cases, those don't carry jail time either. If he loses out on a civil appeal, it could mean a policy gets blocked or he's hitting up for damages, but he won't be going to jail. On another note, there's this big issue with social media. Some viral videos on platforms like YouTube throw out speculations and entertainments as if they're news, complete with disclaimers saying, hey, this isn't real. Like I came across a video from February 6th claiming the Supreme Court rejected an appeal and that Trump's on the verge of arrest. But if you peek at the disclaimer, it clearly states the content is fictional. Yet many viewers miss that note entirely, just take the video at face value and share it around. This leads to a lot of confusion about what's actually going down with Trump's legal situation and what's just pure fiction. And if we zoom out a bit, it's clear there's a bigger political picture at play here. Trump's approval numbers are pretty low, sitting at around 36%. Plus, there's a good chunk of Americans, about 59%, who aren't on board with the Iran war. It seems like things are pretty tangled up for him. So, let's talk about what's buzzing around Trump and those rumors of him facing arrest. With Congress and the Democrats feeling hopeful about flipping the House in the midterms, there's definitely a vibe that has some folks thinking Trump could be in big trouble, legally speaking. A lot of people who aren't on Trump's side are eager to see him held accountable, which explains why videos claiming he's facing imminent arrest because of an appeal rejection have been racking up views. People really want to believe those claims. But here's the reality. Those videos are misleading. Trump's criminal cases? They're all wrapped up. The appeals swirling around now are about policy issues, not any personal criminal liability. Plus, Trump has legal protections that pretty much shield him from getting arrested. Many of those viral videos either blow the civil appeals way out of proportion or present made-up stories as if they're real news. Sadly, a lot of people take them at face value because they want to think Trump is finally facing some consequences, so they share the content without checking the facts, which lets that misinformation spread far and wide. It's a prime example of how clickbait thrives. It feeds off people's hopes and anxieties just to rack up clicks and views, crafting false narratives along the way that muddy the waters about what's really going on. To set the record straight, no recent appeals have signaled any fears of Trump getting arrested right now. Those recent appeals are about civil matters like law firm orders and immigration issues, not criminal cases. As for Trump's past issues, his criminal cases are finished. That New York conviction has resulted in an unconditional discharge, so no jail time there. The federal cases? Dismissed with no pending appeals. And let's not forget he's got that layer of Supreme Court immunity and DOJ policy that makes an arrest while in office pretty much impossible. Some of those videos might reference fanciful claims from YouTube with disclaimers saying the content is speculative rather than actual news. The idea that Trump is facing an imminent arrest is just stretching the truth about civil policy appeals or outright fabrications being passed off as news. If you've got any thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them. Are these videos part of a deliberate misinformation campaign, or are people just getting lost between what civil and criminal cases really mean? Let's keep the conversation going. And if you want to stay updated with genuine facts, you should definitely consider subscribing to our newsletter. We'll help you sort through all that clickbait each day. Links are in the description. That wraps up today's update. I'll catch you in the next one.